The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the air in the private blood donation center, a place far removed from the cheerful posters and free cookies of a public clinic. This was a transaction, cold and clinical. For Clara Davies, it was the only path left. Her grandmother's face, pale and frail against a hospital pillow, flashed in her mind. The mounting bills were a suffocating weight, and her blood her rare. Null golden blood was her last asset. Just a little more, the nurse said, her voice devoid of sympathy. She tightened the strap on Clara's arm, ignoring the way Clara's head was starting to swim. The needle felt like a shard of ice in her vein. She watched the dark crimson liquid drain from her body, filling a bag with a swiftness that felt predatory. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the room tilting on its axis. "Please," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. I think that's enough. I feel faint." The nurse merely glanced at the monitor. "The client's order is for 500 cc. We're almost there. Just hold still." Her vision began to blur, the white walls dissolving into a hazy grey. Desperation clawed at her throat. They were going to drain her dry. Just as a black void began to creep in at the edges of her sight, the door to the room crashed open, slamming against the wall with a deafening crack. A figure stood silhouetted against the hallway light, tall, broad-shouldered, and radiating an aura of absolute command. He moved with a predator's grace, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the sterile medical environment. His face, when he stepped into the light, was a masterpiece of sharp angles and cold fury. Dark eyes, intense and piercing, scanned the scene and landed on the needle in her arm. "Stop," he commanded. The word was low, almost a growl, but it carried the weight of an earthquake. The medical staff froze, their professional detachment shattering. Now, two men in black suits flanked him, their presence instantly turning the room into a cage. They moved with silent efficiency, one physically removing the nurse's hand from the equipment while the other expertly disconnected the four, applying gentle pressure to Clara's arm. Through the fog of her fading consciousness, Clara stared at the handsome stranger. His expression, though harsh, was fixed on her, a strange, protective intensity simmering in his gaze. A desperate, almost delirious thought flickered through her mind. Is this him? The hero sent by heaven to save me? A single tear escaped the corner of her eye, tracing a path through the cold sweat on her temple. For a fleeting moment, she felt a flicker of hope. As the darkness finally consumed her, the last thing she saw was the man's hand moving almost imperceptibly to press against his own chest, a hidden gesture of pain that went unnoticed by everyone else. Clara awoke to the feel of silk, not the warm cotton of her small apartment, but the impossibly smooth, cool caress of sheets that probably cost more than her rent. She blinked, her senses slowly coming online. The air smelled of lilac and old money. Sunlight streamed through a floor-to-ceiling window, illuminating a bedroom larger than her entire home. She sat up, a wave of vertigo making her pause. She was dressed in a simple, but elegant silk slip, her own worn clothes nowhere in sight. Panic began to bubble in her chest. A discreet knock sounded before the door opened. A man in a crisp suit, his expression polite but unreadable, stepped inside. "Miss Davies, I'm Julian, Mr. Cole's assistant. I'm glad to see you are awake, Mr. Cole." Clara's voice was hoarse. "The man from the clinic." "Yes, Mr. Ethan Cole brought you here to his estate to recover," Julian explained, his tone even and professional. He gestured to a tray of food on a nearby table. "Mr. Cole has a severe, congenital heart ailment. The doctors have given him less than 2 years. Your blood type, the golden blood, is the only compatible match for a life-saving procedure. More than that, ancient texts passed down through his family speak of a woman with your bloodline a woman with a celestial destiny intertwined with his. You are the key to curing him and securing the future of the Cole family. The words sounded like something from a fantasy novel. Celestial destiny. It was absurd. Clara's head spun for an entirely different reason now. Before she could process the bizarre revelation, the door opened again. Ethan Cole himself entered. In the light of day, he was even more imposing. He moved with a quiet confidence that filled the room, his dark eyes assessing her with an unnerving coolness. He dismissed Julian with a flick of his wrist. "You're awake," he stated, his voice as rich and dark as coffee. He didn't ask how she felt. He simply got to the point. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries. Miss Davies, I need you, not just your blood. I am proposing a contract." He paused, letting the weight of his presence settle. "I will give you $100 million. In exchange, you will marry me for 1 year. You will bear my child, an heir to carry on my lineage. After the child is born and my health is stabilized, we will divorce. You will be free to go, and your grandmother's medical care will be covered for the rest of her life." Clara stared at him, aghast. The sheer audacity of the proposal stole her breath. It wasn't an offer. It was a transaction, reducing her to a breadmare, a vessel for his legacy. The flicker of hope she'd felt in the clinic died, replaced by a surge of indignant fury. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Absolutely not." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, so quick she almost missed it. "You are in no position to refuse. My grandmother is sick, and I may be poor, Mr. Cole, but I am not for sale." She shot back, pulling the silk sheets tighter around herself as if they were armor. "I will not sell my body, my marriage, or my child. My dignity is not a commodity you can purchase." Ethan's jaw tightened, his cool demeanor hardening into something more menacing. "Dignity is a luxury for those who can afford it. I'm not the patient man. You have 3 days to reconsider. After that, my offer may not be so generous." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Clara alone in the opulent cage, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and defiance. 3 days later, Clara sat in a small, cozy restaurant, trying desperately to cling to a scrap of normalcy. The weight of Ethan Cole's ultimatum pressed down on her. But tonight was about Carl. It was their 375-day anniversary. Carl, with his easy smile and gentle hands, was her anchor in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. "You just seem a million miles away tonight," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. His touch was warm and familiar. "Don't worry about your grandmother's bills. We'll figure it out. You're the most wonderful person I know, Clara. Everything will be okay." His words were a soothing balm. For a moment, the memory of Ethan's cold eyes faded. She squeezed his hand, a grateful smile touching her lips. The sterile white marble of Ethan Cole's floor felt as cold as a morgue. Carl knelt on the polished floor, his face a swollen canvas of purple and red, framed by 2 of Ethan's unmoving guards. He looked up at Clara, his eyes pleading, but she felt nothing. The part of her that had once loved him had been surgically removed, cauterized by betrayal. "Tell me why," she said, a voice dangerously quiet. The sound was swallowed by the cavernous space, yet it held more weight than a scream. Carl's lip trembled. "Clara, I was desperate. They offered me so much money. Money for what?" She pressed, stepping closer. The scent of his fear was thick in the air. "Say it. I want to hear you say what you sold me for." He flinched as if she had struck him. For you to be with someone else, just for 1 night." I didn't know they were disgust coiled in her gut, hot and venomous. For a fleeting, primal moment, she imagined kicking him, making him feel a fraction of the violation she'd endured. But as she looked at his pathetic, broken form, the rage solidified into a cold, hard stone of contempt. He wasn't worth the effort. He wasn't worth dirtying her shoes over. "I will never forgive you," she stated, each word a final, deliberate nail in the coffin of their past. "Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes. You made a calculation. You put a price on me, and you sold." She turned away, her back straight, refusing to give him another second of her attention. She met Ethan's gaze across the hall. He stood with a stark stillness, his dark eyes fixed on her, assessing. She had expected him to unleash his infamous wrath on Carl, to make an example of him. Instead, he gave a nearly imperceptible nod to his head of security. "Drag him out," Ethan commanded, his voice low and devoid of emotion, "and make sure he understands what happens if he ever comes within 1,000 feet of Miss Davies again." Just like that, it was over. The guards hauled Carl to his feet, his muffled protests silenced as the heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. The ensuing silence was profound. Ethan had held back his power, not for himself, but for her. He had seen that her verdict was punishment enough. In that quiet act of deference, Clara saw past the ruthless corporate raider to the man beneath, a man of surprising perception and restraint. A warmth she hadn't anticipated began to unspool inside her chest, a fragile thread of trust in a world that had given her little reason to feel it. An hour later, Clara unlocked the door to her small apartment, the one she shared with her ailing grandmother. The familiar scent of lavender and old books was a comforting balm. She was exhausted, but for the first time in years, she felt a sliver of control over her own life. The feeling lasted less than 10 seconds. The door was thrown open before she could close it, slamming against the wall. Her biological parents, John and Mary Davies, stormed in, their faces contorted with greed. Her brother, Leo, slouched behind them, a predatory smirk on his face. Well, look who it is," her mother sneered, her eyes scanning the modest apartment with disdain. "Finally decided to come back after sleeping with someone for money." Clara froze, her newfound strength wavering. "What are you doing here? What are we doing here?" Her father barked, his voice thick with entitlement. "We saw the news, the pictures of you with Ethan Cole. You think you can keep all that money for yourself? Leo needs a new car, a house. We're your family. You are us." He spat the words like they were a birthright. "We'll start with 20 million. The sheer audacity of it left her breathless. These were the people who had left her to be raised by her grandmother, visiting only when they needed to borrow money they never repaid. They had poured every spare cent into Leo, their precious son, while she was an afterthought. "I don't have any money," she said, a voice shaking with repressed fury. "And I don't owe you anything. Grandma raised me. You were never there. Ungrateful brat." Mary shrieked, lunging forward. She grabbed Clara's arm, her nails digging into her skin. "We gave you life. You owe us everything." John moved to box her in, his face menacingly close. "You'll get us that money, or we'll tell everyone what a little whore you are." A fragile, crashing sound cut through the shouting. They all turned. In the doorway to the bedroom, her grandmother stood, her face pale with shock, a shattered teacup at her feet. She clutched her chest, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps, before her eyes rolled back and she crumpled to the floor. "Grandma!" Clara screamed, shoving her parents aside. Panic seized her. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with a cold sweat. But as she looked up, the doorway was filled by a dark, imposing figure. Ethan Cole stood there, his presence sucking all the air from the tiny room. His gaze was glacial, sweeping over her frantic parents and the unconscious woman on the floor before settling on Clara. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "My wife is being bullied," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Why would I not be here?" He didn't wait for an answer. He moved with a swift, predatory grace, pulling out his phone. Dr. Evans, I need you at this address, now. Suspected cardiac event. He rattled off the location, his authority absolute. He ended the call and his eyes fell upon John and Mary, who had frozen in place, their greed instantly replaced by primal fear. Get away from them, he ordered. The command was spoken, not shouted, yet it carried the weight of an executioner's sentence. They scrambled back as if burned, empowered by his solid presence at her back. Clara felt a surge of righteous fire. She stood, facing the people who had given her life only to try and bleed it dry. 20 million, she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. Is that the price for selling your daughter? You want a marriage payment? Ethan's eyebrow arched, a silent signal of support. Then you'll sign this first, Clara declared, her voice ringing with finality. One of Ethan's assistants, who had appeared silently behind him, stepped forward and placed a document and a pen on the coffee table. A severance decree. It legally and irrevocably terminated all parental rights and future claims. John and Mary stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. Their blustering evaporated, replaced by the terrified understanding of who they were dealing with. Ethan Cole didn't make threats. He erased problems. With trembling hands, her father picked up the pen. His signature was a jagged, cowardly scrawl. Her mother followed, tears of frustrated greed streaming down her face. They signed away their only daughter, not out of respect for her wishes, but out of sheer terror of the man who stood beside her. As they dropped the pen and backed away, Clara felt the last toxic chain snap. She was free. A cold dread, sharp and suffocating, seized Clara Davies as she stared at the projector screen. It was her design, the intricate silver filigree, the delicate cascade of sapphires meant to evoke starlight on water. Her soul, rendered in metal and stone. But it was her roommate, Amelia, standing at the podium, her voice a saccharine melody of lies. The celestial tear, Amelia announced, a triumphant glint in her eyes, a piece inspired by a very personal moment of heartache and hope. Whispers rippled through the university's grand competition hall. Clara's blood ran ice cold. It was a replica, down to the last impossible detail. She felt the eyes of the judges, the faculty, and her peers slowly turning toward her. A silent accusation building in the air. Before she could find her voice, Amelia's gaze landed on her, a mask of feigned injury falling perfectly into place. I know what you're all thinking. Amelia's voice trembled, a masterpiece of staged vulnerability. She pointed a shaking finger at Clara. You've seen Clara's submission. They're identical. Because she stole it. I saw her in our room, looking through my private sketchbook just last week. I thought she was just curious. I never imagined the tear slid down her cheek. And a crowd gasped, a collective sound of outrage. Clara shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. That's not true. That's my design. I have the original drafts. Her voice trailed off. The drafts. Her laptop, with every file, every rendering, had conveniently crashed 2 days ago. Her physical sketchbook had vanished from their room yesterday. A sick realization dawned. This was a calculated, vicious demolition. She had no proof. Liar. Someone shouted from the back. Plagiarist. Another voice echoed, the dean of design. A stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance stood up. Miss Davies, these are grave accusations. Do you have any evidence to support your claim? Clara's mouth was dry. Her mind raced, a frantic scramble through a barren landscape. Nothing. She had nothing. I know, but she's lying. Please, you have to believe me. Her plea was swallowed by the rising tide of condemnation. Her artistic integrity, the one thing she cherished above all else, was being publicly shredded. Her future, the scholarship, the degree, the career she had bled for, was dissolving into ash. She was alone, cornered, and the walls were closing in. Just as the dean raised her hand to call security, the heavy auditorium doors at the back of the hall swung open with a definitive thud. A silence fell, every head turning toward the disruption. Ethan Cole stood silhouetted against the bright hallway light, his presence an immediate and absolute shift in the room's gravity. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, and his expression was a mask of cold fury. The university president, scurrying behind him, looked flustered. "Mr. Cole, we weren't expecting you. I was in the area." Ethan's voice was low, but carried an authority that commanded total silence. He strode down the aisle, his gaze locked on Clara. The crowd parted for him like the sea before a king. "I heard a commotion. It seems there's some confusion regarding the ownership of a design." He stopped beside a stunned Clara, his hand resting possessively on the back of her chair. He addressed the dean, but his eyes never left his wife. "There is no confusion. That design belongs to Clara Davies." Amelia scoffed, emboldened by her apparent victory. "And who are you to say?" The university president stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Amelia, this is Mr. Ethan Cole, our university's single largest donor and benefactor." A wave of shocked murmurs swept the hall. Ethan ignored them. He met Amelia's gaze with an arctic stare that made her flinch. "I know it's a design," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm, "because she designed it for me. As my wife." He raised his right hand, and the light caught the ring on his finger, the very same celestial tear design, masterfully crafted in platinum and sapphire. It was a tangible, undeniable statement. The crowd let out a collective gasp. Ethan's public declaration was like a defibrillator to Clara's heart. Strength surged through her, chasing away the despair. She looked from Ethan's unwavering face to Amelia's, which was rapidly draining of color. Finding her voice, Clara stepped forward. "There's one more thing," she said, her tone clear and steady. She gestured to the projection. "Zoom in on the primary setting, just beneath the main sapphire." The technician complied. On the massive screen, magnified for all to see, a hidden detail became clear. Engraved in the filigree, so cleverly integrated they were nearly invisible, were two initials, the cursive C for Clara, seamlessly intertwined with the elegant E for Ethan. It was her secret signature, a personal mark of their bond. "It's a maker's mark," Clara announced, her eyes boring into Amelia. "My mark? I doubt that's in your private sketchbook." The lie was exposed. Amelia crumbled, stammering denials that convinced no one. The dean's face was thunderous. "Security, escort Miss Miller out. She is hereby expelled. Her actions will be reported to every design guild in the country. She is blacklisted." As Amelia was led away, humiliated, Clara felt a profound sense of vindication. It wasn't just relief. It was a surge of power, realizing Ethan's faith in her was an armor she hadn't known she possessed. Ethan leaned in, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He then turned back to the president. "To celebrate my wife's undisputed talent and to ensure this institution remembers the value of integrity, I will be doubling my annual donation. It will be made in Clara Cole's name." Later, in the quiet sanctuary of his car, the city light sliding past the window, Clara finally let out a long, shaky breath. She turned to him, a small, playful smile touching her lips. "Do you have a GPS tracker on me? You have a real knack for showing up right when my world is about to end." Ethan's severe expression softened slightly. "I was on my way to take you to lunch. My assistant called ahead to your department to check on your schedule and overheard the situation." Just then, his phone buzzed. He answered, his voice returning to its usual businesslike click. "Yes, Mark, no. I haven't eaten. I'll eat when I'm with Clara." Reschedule the afternoon. He hung up, oblivious to the way his words landed on her heart. He wouldn't even eat without her. A warm, unfamiliar feeling bloomed in her chest. I know I'm riding your coattails, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Using your name, your power, but she met his intense gaze. I think I really need you. It wasn't about the contract, or the money, or even the protection anymore. It was a simple, terrifying, and genuine admission. He didn't respond, but a flicker of something deep and unguarded passed through his eyes. Seeing her chance, she pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo of them sitting together in the dim light of the car. What are you doing? He asked, a hint of amusement in his tone. My phone's screensaver is a picture of a cat, she said, her fingers flying across the screen. I think it's time for an upgrade. She turned the phone to show him their picture, now her wallpaper. He looked at the image, then at her, a fond, exasperated smile finally breaking through his reserved facade. Childish, he murmured, but his eyes told a different story. The space between them hummed with an unspoken understanding, a quiet warmth that began to feel less like a temporary arrangement and more like the foundation of something real. The air in the Cole family ancestral home was as heavy and suffocating as the scent of age, mahogany, and old money that permeated its walls. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down from their gilded frames, their painted eyes serving as a jury for the woman Ethan's younger brother, Julian, had just dragged before them. Clara Davies stood on the cold marble of the ground hall, feeling impossibly small, a lone weed in a meticulously cultivated garden. Ethan was meant to be in Singapore, closing a deal that would secure the company's future for a decade. Julian had used his absence as an opportunity, a strategic ambush. Grandmother wants to meet the woman who has so thoroughly bewitched our Ethan, he'd said, his voice laced with a saccharine poison. Now, she faced the matriarch herself. Eleanor Cole, a woman carved from granite and steel, sat enthroned in a high-backed chair, her gaze sweeping over Clara with undisguised contempt. So, this is Eleanor's voice was a blade of ice. The country bumpkin Ethan has picked up from a hospital ward. Tell me, child, what precisely do you have to offer a family like ours, besides your conveniently rare blood? The other elders, aunts and uncles arranged like vultures on velvet settees, murmured their agreement. The words were a physical blow, each one designed to strip her of her dignity. Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She thought of Ethan, of the quiet strength in his eyes when he looked at her, and forced her spine to remain straight. She would not crumble for them. My sincerity, Clara said, her voice trembling only slightly. Eleanor let out a short, dismissive laugh. Sincerity is worthless without breeding. It is the plea of the commoner at the palace gates. But, if you insist on proving this sincerity, there is a way. Our family has traditions for those who wish to marry in from beneath their station. Her eyes gleamed with a cruel light. You will kneel before each of us. 100 bows, a small show of deference to prove you understand the weight of the name you so desperately wish to claim. A collective gasp, feigned and theatrical, went through the room. Julian watched with a smug, satisfied smirk. 100 bows to each of the 5 elders present. 500 total. It was a punishment, a deliberate act of degradation disguised as tradition. Clara's mind reeled. The humiliation was a burning fire in her gut, but a colder, more potent fear washed over it. The fear of embarrassing Ethan, of proving them right. If she walked away, they would use it as proof that she was flighty and unworthy. If she stayed, she would have to endure this torment for Ethan, she thought. She took a deep breath. The stale, colder air shocked to her lungs and lowered herself to her knees on the unyielding marble. She started with the elder furthest to the left, a great uncle with a sour, pinched face. 1. Her forehead touched the cold floor, 2. Her back began to ache, 3. The room was utterly silent, save for the whisper of her clothes against the stone. Thousands of miles away, a sharp, crushing pain exploded in Ethan's chest. The boardroom in Singapore blurred, the faces of his business partners contorting in alarm. He dropped his pen, his hand flying to his heart as he gasped for air. It felt as if a vice was tightening around his ribs, stealing his breath, his life. Mr. Cole, his assistant cried out, "Medic, we need a medic." Doctors were there in an instant, shouting terms he barely registered. Heart attack. Critical. He needed to be stabilized and taken to the hospital immediately. But as they tried to move him onto a stretcher, a sudden, inexplicable vision flooded his mind. Clara, on her knees, her face pale and strained, surrounded by the predatory faces of his family. The image was so vivid, so visceral. It cut through the fog of his pain with terrifying clarity. She was in trouble. No, he rasped, pushing away a doctor's hand. Not the hospital. He struggled to sit up, his vision swimming. "Get the jet. We're going home. Now, sir. You could die." His assistant pleaded, his face ashen. Ethan's gaze was fixed on something none of them could see. A promise he'd made to Clara in the quiet of his penthouse. "I will never let anyone hurt you. She needs me," he gritted out, the words tearing from his throat. Get the jet. Clara had lost count. 200, 300. Her knees were raw. Her muscles screamed with every agonizing movement. And a dull, throbbing pain had settled at the base of her spine. Sweat trickled down her temples, mingling with the tears of frustration she refused to let fall. The faces of the elders had blurred into a single, sneering mask of judgment. Only the thought of Ethan's face kept her going. His smile, the feel of his hand in hers. She would not fail him. She moved before the final elder. Eleanor Cole, her grandmother. The air crackled with tension as Clara began the final 100 bows. Each one was a testament of will, a silent act of rebellion. She wasn't bowing to them. She was fighting for her right to love their grandson. 98. 99. She pushed herself up one last time, her body a single, screaming nerve of exhaustion, and performed the final bow. Her forehead rested on the cold marble for a long moment before she pushed herself, trembling, to her feet. She stood before them, bruised and exhausted, but unbroken. The elders stared, their expressions a mixture of shock and a sliver of something that looked like grudging respect. It was in that moment of strained silence that the great oak doors of the hall swung open with a resounding crack. Ethan stood framed in the doorway, his face the color of ash, a sheen of cold sweat on his brow. He was leaning heavily against the door frame, his suit disheveled, but his eyes were blazing with a protective fire that swept over the room and consumed everything in its path. He saw the state of her, the raw skin of her knees visible through her rumpled dress, the exhaustion etched on her face, and his expression hardened into something lethal. "What have you done?" His voice was low, but it carried the authority of a king, silencing the startled murmurs. He pushed himself off the frame and strode into the room, his focus solely on Clara. He ignored his stunned family, ignored Julian's panicked expression, and came to a stop directly in front of her. He gently took her hand, his thumb stroking her skin as if to erase their cruelty. Then he turned to face his grandmother, his eyes glittering with fury. "This is the woman I am going to marry," he declared, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "This family will show her respect, or they will have none from me. Her strength, her heart, her endurance, it is more than any of you deserve." Eleanor Cole stared, not at her furious grandson, but at Clara. She saw the grit in the young woman's posture, the unwavering loyalty that had driven her to endure such an ordeal. And she saw the soul-deep devotion in Ethan's eyes, a look she had never seen him give anyone. He was willing to defy death itself for this girl. In that instant, the matriarch's iron will fractured. She saw not a country bumpkin, but a future queen. She has proven herself, Eleanor announced, her voice quiet but firm, sending shockwaves through the other elders. She has the cold fortitude. Ethan's gaze softened as it returned to Clara, the anger receding to be replaced by a look of such profound love and awe it stole her breath. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise echoing his spoken one. I am here. I will always be here. Her struggle was over for now. Their destiny, once a fragile thread, was now being forged into an unbreakable chain.